All right, then, time to start the meeting. Good evening and welcome. I'm Jean McKnight, a co-chair of the Needham Housing Plan Working Group. And this open meeting of the working group is being conducted remotely, consistent with current state regulations. It is being recorded. Public access to this meeting is provided via Zoom. But this meeting, unlike our recent community meeting, will not have public comment. This is a meeting for the Housing Plan Working Group itself to make decisions based on what we heard at the recent community meeting and some other input. First, I want to confirm that a quorum of members of the Housing Plan Working Group are here. So when I call your name, I'll also mention your affiliation. Please respond with here or present so that we can hear you, and then I'll introduce planning department and town staff. Here we have Natasha Espada.
Here.
And Natasha is also serves on the planning board, as do I, and is co-chair of this housing plan working group. Emily.
Here.
Oh, there's Emily, right next to me on the screen. Emily Cooper.
Sorry, my dog is just trying to
Sure,
join
says-
the meeting too.
A citizen at large. Ed Cosgrove, who,
Here.
hi Ed, he serves on our town's Board of Health. Heidi Frail, who is Heidi, who serves on our select board.
Here.
Oh, here Marcus is here. Okay. Helen Gregory, who serves on our Council on Aging.
Here.
Oscar Mertz, a citizen at large.
Here.
Marcus Nelson, who with Heidi Frail serves on our select board.
Here.
And Michael O'Brien, who serves on our school committee.
Here.
And Carol Fischetti is also a member of the Housing Plan Working Group, but Carol was unable to be with us this evening. And now let me introduce our town staff. Lee Newman, our planning director.
Here.
Karen Sunarborg, our community housing specialist.
Here, and I think I saw Ed Scheidler too.
Oh, did I not?
No.
Oh,
Hi, Ed.
I'm sorry.
Hi, Karen.
Of course, Ed was here nice and early.
Marcus
too.
just came in and Michael
There he
O'Brien
is.
and Rhonda.
Ed
Is Rhonda here
Scheidler,
too?
who serves on our housing authority.
I'm here
Oh,
too.
Ed. And
And
did I
Rhonda?
get to the end of the list? Rhonda Spector, citizen at large.
I'm here.
I somehow stopped it before I got to the end of the list. Sorry about that, guys.
And-
And I introduced Lee and Karen, and also Alex Clee, assistant planner,
Here.
is with us.
And-
So,
Excuse me,
um,
Jean, Michael O'Brien and Marcus Nelson are also here.
yes, I did introduce Michael.
Okay.
and-
Okay. Just want to make
yeah,
sure.
And Marcus. Yeah, I
Thanks.
did.
Thank you.
To them. And we want to approve the minutes of our last meeting, and that was the meeting of October 27. So I hope you've had an opportunity to review the minutes, and I wonder if someone might make a motion to accept the minutes, or is there any question or anything about the minutes?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
So I think was it Heidi who made the motion and Natasha who seconded. So we'll do a roll call vote to accept the minutes. I think this time I'll just go around the screen. Emily Cooper,
Yes.
Ed Scheidler,
Hi.
Heidi Frail,
Yes.
Oscar Mertz,
Yes.
Helen Gregory,
Yes.
Natasha Espada,
Yes.
Rhonda Spector,
Yes.
Ed Cosgrove,
Yes.
Michael O'Brien,
Yes.
and Marcus Nelson.
Yes.
All right, we have the minutes taken care of. So Natasha is going to kind of sum up the community meeting and then turn the gavel over to me to discuss possible revisions, substantive revisions to the housing plan. So Natasha.
Thanks, Jean. And I kind of wanted just to remind everyone, we had a great community meeting on November 16th. And just a couple of things that were discussed. Jean went through the PowerPoint presentation, Emily and I also, and others added information based on all the different subgroups. But I just to remind everyone some of the comments that we heard. One is the question about population increase in town based on the amount of units per year and the increases in school costs. Some people wanted to create permit fees for affordable housing, and others opposed waiving permit fees. I guess that's the same thing. Some wanted permit and some didn't. Then I'm going to get to the women, the League of Women Voters, because they had an entire group of information, but there was concerns regarding tree preservation and the Chapter 40R smart growth overlay districts, which include financial incentives and are included in the housing plan for further study. One of the things that was discussed was preserving the community starter housing stock that is being eroded by gentrification. Because of the tear downs, he recommended the town maintain local preference also, and that was Mo Handel. A significant need for more housing in Needham was a big topic, and the housing plan does a good job of defining the need, but must make sure that there is an entity in place to implement recommendations. So implementation and accountability was a big thing. And then ADUs, how do we increase housing diversity in ADUs? Parking requirements being too strict and possibly being reduced from 1.5 spaces to 1 to reduce project costs and encourage more development. Some talked about the housing plan demonstrating need to not only support housing for low and moderate income households, but also to help others with in the community for as long as possible, to remain in the community for as long as possible. They also was a lot of appreciation for the outreach and all the community work that we have done, and would like continued resident input as a town moves forward towards implementation. And then the need to analyze impacts of the new development, including traffic and tree removal, and recommended that developers also do some community outreach with the abutters, and that the design review board encourage public comment. We talked about transfer tax fees that could become a major resource for funding affordable housing through the Affordable Housing Trust. And just more strict tear down bylaws. And then there is also the work coordinating all of this with the Climate Action Plan Committee and Town Parking Study to promote greater energy efficiencies and parking requirement reductions to make development more sustainable and feasible. I thought what was also the last piece here is the president, Carol, Jean, how do you say her name? Patey, president of Needham's League of Women's Voters, presented their comments, which includes recommendation for compliance with MBTA community guidelines, inclusionary zoning to 12.5%, rethinking roles and responsibilities of the Affordable Housing Trust, broadening ADU requirements, promoting greater energy efficiencies in housing, and revisiting zoning with respect to tear down activity. She also expressed the league's support of at least 22% allocation of CPA funds for housing, the Needham Housing Authority's Preservation and Redevelopment Initiative, and more housing for people with disabilities, and maximizing the reuse of the Stephen Palmer Building for affordable housing, and that the town should hire an affordable housing specialist and annually measure progress with respect to the implementation of the housing plan. And then Laura Dorfman, the last one, to talk about chair of the She's the chair of the town's historical commission. She mentioned that the town has a demolition delay bylaw of 6 months for historically significant buildings, and that she would be happy to discuss opportunities to change the bylaws to make it more effective. So I think we got some really good feedback. It was very positive with a lot of great pieces. But what I got out of it is that there was a lot of consensus on these items, and that a lot of it is covered in the housing plan. And I think after tonight is understanding the implementation and what the next steps are. So with that, I didn't mean to make it so long, but it's been a while, so I felt like we needed to recap a little broader. So now, Jean, I'll hand it back to you, and everybody should have this with them. I just tried to recap, even though it was long.
Thank you, Natasha. That was a very good overview, and I think gave the impression too, which I think is true, that in general, the comments that we got were positive and encouraging. People commenting raised reasonable issues that I want to turn to tonight. I want to make sure also that you've received and had an opportunity to review the community meeting summary, that 4-page summary that Karen Sinabo put together. That's also a very good summary of that meeting. Distributed in the form of an email attachment and also in the packet was a list of comments for discussion. And that's our job. That's what I see our job tonight is to go over those comments and see whether we agree, disagree, whether we want to make substantive changes to the housing plan. Then Karen Sinabo will make those changes. And also, if you have non-substantive changes that on your review, you see some kind of error in whatever kind of typing error or anything like that that's non-substantive, you can, I'm gonna send a red line with a few little things, every 5 pages or so I see something, that kind of change can be made without further discussion. And the housing plan then will be sent out to us in its presumably final form. And we'll have one more meeting for the purpose of approving the housing plan. Then it will go to the select board for approval, and it will go to the planning board for approval. What I did is, when there were comments where it seemed as though we had actually addressed the comment at the meeting and there really wasn't a need for any further change, I put the comments in this list, but I didn't highlight or put in bold any particular question. So if you, I don't know, I'd rather see your faces because we're going to do a lot of discussion rather than having all this verbiage up on the screen. So I hope you have printouts, or in any event, I'll go over it. So
excuse me, Jean, one quick second. And all of the letters that have been coming in are included in this list of comments for discussion, right? We've received
yes,
several letters also,
yes,
independent from the community meeting.
What the list of comments includes goes back to our own October 27th meeting, where comments were made by our own members, and then moves on to the select board meeting on October, excuse me, let me make sure that is the next one. No, then goes to the community meeting comments, then the select board meeting on October 11th, where comments were made, then a planning board meeting that occurred just this Monday, where some comments were made, then ending with the written comments that we received. We had a deadline of November 23rd to read, and we got about 5 written.
So those are in addition to this list.
No, they are summarized. The comments are on the list.
Paula's letter, I think, came separately, right? Paula Dickerman's letter came with the list of comments, right?
Yes, it did, and
I think
I
she came
have,
in late. I think she wasn't included, but
oh, excuse me, do I not have Paula Dickerman's
She's,
comments on this list? I thought I
we,
had.
no,
it.
she's not in the list. I think she's separate, right?
Jean, I
me.
had her comments included on the first piece on which it was built, so, I mean, it should, some of them should be in under, they should have been in there, I think.
Okay,
Well,
okay.
if anything's missing as we go along, I certainly don't mean to ignore anybody's comments. But why don't we get started? Coming out of our own housing plan working group, Emily Cooper suggested that payments in lieu of affordable units should apply to all areas of town, as opposed to just projects with less than 6 units. There was a discussion of that at that time. Oscar Mertz thought the mandatory fees, is concerned about the mandatory fees being burdensome for small projects, implying that he thought maybe we shouldn't have them at all. I presented at that meeting that I'd rather have actual units as opposed to payments, and thus fees, we're only talking about fees for projects of less than 6 units, 3, 4, 5 unit projects. There would be a proportionate fee in proportion to the cost of producing a whole unit. You know, if it'd be 50% of that or something like that, depending on the number of units. Heidi Freo suggested including some language that mentions some consideration for implementing fees on a broader basis. So the question is, should we keep as it is with affordable units being required for projects of 6 or more units? And we're generally looking for 12.5% of the units to be affordable in multifamily developments. So that would be, if it's an 8-unit development, one of them would be affordable. Also, one would be affordable if it were 6 or 7 unit development. But the idea is the only provision we have in our zoning bylaw now that calls for any kind of payment like that is in the neighborhood business district that is up by Route 128, that where Pinellas Market is, and we presently have a proposal before us for housing development at that location that's going to be mixed-use development and is going to have, I think, 3 affordable units per. There wouldn't be any payment, but there is a formula for a payment if it happened to be a very small project. So that's the question. Should we keep it as we have it proposed? That is, developments of 6 or more units provide affordable units according to the 12.5% formula. 3 developments, a 3-family, a 4-family, a 5-family have to pay in, and the paying in is what's new. Let me take comments. Emily isn't the one.
Just maybe just a clarification. So there is, right on Honeywell, right up the bridge over the highway, there's a big 4 townhouses, let's say 4 condos, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have to do an affordable, they're massive and they're lovely and they're multi-million dollars. They didn't have to do an affordable unit and they didn't have to pay anything.
That's absolutely right. Presently, we in that particular location, and that also applied to the brand new multifamily development that went in on Honeywell Street,
right,
just over the bridge. There's no requirement, so we'd be instituting a requirement for that.
I guess I was trying to get at those kind of properties that, yes, it doesn't make sense to say put a unit in there, but that it would be helpful to get a fee that we could then repurpose for other purposes. That, if these are going to be, $1.5 million condos that are created, that there might be an in lieu of fee. I was just sort of trying to get at those properties, but
Mhm.
that was just
Well,
my
what,
thinking.
I think the townhouse development that you're speaking of, right at the corner of Honeywell and West Street, although there are buildings in that development that might only have 2 or 3 units, that actually was a development of maybe, I don't know, 12 units. That's a big development.
I think I'm talking about Honeywell and Hillside, actually.
Oh, Honeywell, that's also a big development.
Yeah, there are a few over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
But
not
there's one
just,
that's big, and then there's one that's being built across the street, which is
Yes.
which is a couple of different, it's either 2 or 3 adjoining things, and then there's one next to the daycare. There's a few on those blocks, and at least 2 of them, I think, are less than 6.
well,
So I'm
maybe
just
there
putting
are
it out there.
some, maybe there are some that are less than 6 and more than 2.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. 3, 4, and 5 units. Now, we really don't have the zoning in place for 3, 4, and 5 unit developments. So this is rare. But the idea is, if it were built, and we've had a few, for example, on Oak Street, there were not enough units. They may have ended up having 4 units in a mixed-use development on Oak Street, right near the railroad crossing. So they didn't have to make any payment, and they didn't have to have any affordable units. So, occasionally we do have these small developments. Too small, the theory is they're too small to make them provide a unit. Should we require that they pay money in proportion? And should we always require a unit for the larger developments? Or should we just have a provision that says either provide a unit or money, the way they do for some of their very fancy developments in downtown Boston? I feel as though personally, it's kind of classist to say, oh, our development is too special to have affordable units. We'll just give you money. That's my personal point of view. So what are your thoughts? Rhonda?
Well, I don't know how I definitely think that the project on Honeywell next to the daycare center, the idea that didn't have to pay anything in is absolutely unbelievable. It's creating, I think there's $6 million and a half units, or $1.2 million.
I think it may be 8 units. And
so wouldn't that have had to pay in?
No, because we have no requirement in our current zoning for them to provide an affordable unit.
Okay.
Under our proposed zoning, it's in our housing plan, a development like that would have to provide 1 affordable unit.
Okay. Well, I absolutely agree with that. That's either that, or if it's determined to be, the thing is that it's very hard to do the math because there's a difference between if they'd put in, or if somebody had built 10 moderate units or reasonable, 600, thousand or $800,000 units versus, 6 million and a half. So there's some math that should go into, what is it we're trying to incentivize? I mean, if people are selling them for less, or if there was some sort of restriction on resale, that there's just sort of a, it's not easy to say, just do this and it'll all work out, because, 6 units at that price could afford to put in some money. And if you build 10 units, but they're more moderate, they won't be able to afford more money, but that would be moderate housing. So we should just think about what it is we're trying to accomplish. But absolutely, I agree with you that, that something should get paid. And in terms of the
that something should get paid.
there should be a contribution to affordable housing somehow.
Maybe
No
it's a
matter
percentage of the sale
what
price.
size the development is, even a larger development that could put in the units.
So on the larger one, I'm with you. I don't think it should be necessarily segregated. There's some benefits sometimes. I mean, I guess the question is, can you put in a provision that the planning board could agree to that. If, for example, somebody was coming in and trying to put in affordable housing and they didn't have enough money to do it, and the town would be better off with 30 units of affordable housing that could get some linkage, there might be some benefit. But the big thing that I've seen is that as soon as you translate it into money, you can't usually afford an entire unit with the money. The money doesn't come up to enough to actually construct a unit. And so you're better off with the unit.
Okay, better off with the unit. So you're saying you're better off with the unit, which is what I think. But there should be a provision for some circumstances in which the planning board could agree to a money payment instead. Is that what you're saying, Miranda?
You know, you hate to cut off your nose to spite your face, to not give yourself the ability to do something in terms of an exchange. Because if somebody's coming in and trying to do something really incredible, but they can't afford to, and they could afford to if there was some linkage from a project, then, you know, I'm just saying, if you can figure out a policy that allows you to have some discretion, it probably would be worth looking
Okay,
at.
and it would be at the it
Discretion.
wouldn't be something imposed by the planning board, other than for the
Right.
three,
It could
4, and 5 unit developments. But on the larger developments, it would be the developer asking for this.
Right. And
And the
then,
planning board saying, all right, I can see that your circumstances, this is a good idea for us to get money instead of a unit.
wouldn't that be, I think that would be a win-win, that,
Okay.
you know.
All right, Oscar, what are your thoughts?
I think I agree. We do need to figure out a strategy for the under 6 unit developments. I think there should be a pay-in. I don't think I don't know a lot about this, but I don't think you're typically looking for a contribution that's buying a unit. You're looking for a contribution that's picking up the delta between a market rate unit and an affordable price at an 80%. AMI, right? So it's
There's a
somewhere in the order.
formula that is, we refer to in that one zone where we have this provision. And Karen Cernobrook is knowledgeable about these formulas that one applies to make it fair and proportionate.
I
Right.
think it's really important that whatever formula is included for a payment in lieu of units be substantial enough to subsidize an affordable unit. So that's the key piece.
Right. What is that? How do you do that math?
So there are a couple of ways of doing it that are included in the housing plan. We did one, the neighborhood business district at 128, we put in a provision that ties the payment to DHCD's qualified allocation plan. Every year they update that on kind of for their financing on what project costs, actual costs are for Metro Boston, for preservation projects, for suburban areas, urban areas, preservation projects, special needs. They break it down, and using that plug-in figure that changes every year is what we use in the neighborhood business district. You know, there is also, other formulas that are included in, but the idea is that you come up with a formula which actually does cover the costs of producing an affordable unit.
So that's
That's-
exactly what we're talking about
and if it doesn't-
duplicating.
For the cost, it goes into like the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and we get to
Right.
repurpose it and put it in with other projects as needed. It doesn't have
Right.
to be a this for a that. I do think that, we might have a threshold. We might want to say, all right, first preference is for a unit. If that's not feasible because of the size of the project is too small, then if your project is going to have certain, either rental or home ownership properties in it that are going to be X per square foot or X per market value, whatever it may be, then you'll have to contribute. I mean, to Rhonda's point, we don't want to overburden somebody who's trying to make housing that is, that they're reasonable one bedroom condos. But I think what we're trying to say is if your builder can afford to build properties and their luxury housing, that this is going to have to be worked into the equation.
Okay.
So it's some
Let
sort of-
me
yeah.
see who else wants to talk and then. I'm gonna
Oscar's hand's
turn-
been up and then Heidi.
No, I'm
Um,
okay. I'm good.
Heidi.
I do want to turn to Heidi and I want.
I
to
just
say,
really wanted to
we want
clarify.
to make sure what we come up with is something that our staff here thinks is workable. And we can make, we can create the formulas. And I think that's what Karen did say to us just now, but all right, Heidi.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify because I feel like I just heard two different things. It was my understanding that payments that one typically gets and the formulas that we base those payments on are, like Oscar said, to cover the delta between expensive rent and subsidized rent. It's that portion. Karen, it wasn't clear to me. Did you just say that it is to cover the actual cost of the unit or the subsidy to the unit? Because I think
The
that's a really
actual
important
cost.
point. The actual cost of a whole unit?
Yeah,
But if it were just, for example, Karen, what was being built was a 4-unit development, would you proportionally cut that, for example, in half?
using that qualified allocation plan, you would ask the developer to put in the money that would cover the construction of the unit. Probably, rental and ownership's a little different. You probably, would be the difference, but the number is based on this qualified allocation plan. So it's actually right. It's not the full cost. You have to calculate what the affordable price is and have them provide the differential.
So I guess one of the things that we're all struggling with is
In the plan.
the discussion is about a developer coming in and they're doing 4 units and they're targeting a moderate priced product. And then there's a guy coming in who's building multi-million-dollar big buildings. And so you'd expect that the payment in might be reflective of the unit that's being built in some way. So maybe it's I don't know if that's fair. Maybe that is, I don't know. Those are the kinds of discussions though I
The
think that we're all
payment has
getting
to
at.
be sufficient enough to create another affordable unit somewhere else. That's
But
Right.
the whole deal.
Right.
And most inclusionary zoning bylaws don't differentiate between good projects and bad projects or whatever. There's a formula, there's a
Fine.
certain size. This is how many units you need to produce, percentage, and it's kind of straight across the board. If the town decides to do something under the 6 units, that's kind of a pioneer deal because it's not something that other communities have typically done.
Yes, it would be
Why-
new.
My concern here is that, does this working group have to work out the fine details of an updated inclusionary zoning bylaw at this time? I think that we can raise some questions and then have the planning board, when it takes up the bylaw, then kind of at that point, kind of work through the details. I'm not certain we have to arrive at,
That is an excellent
solid-
point, Karen.
this is what we're doing.
Agreed.
And I think that should be for all of the items that we talk about tonight, right? Have a discussion and then figure out.
It
which
also makes the
items-
discussion a whole lot easier.
Yeah,
So back to resolving
so,
question
yes.
one.
Certainly,
me.
the details of this would have to be put in the form of a zoning bylaw that the planning board would have to draft, and that town council would have to say is lawful and likely to be approved by the Attorney General. And it really, the only issue I wanted to put before this group is, do we say absolutely with developments of more than 6 units, we always want a unit right there on that site? Or will we try to develop a bylaw that allows the developer to pay money? That's really the question. And am I getting a consensus that we do want to explore the possibility of having an arrangement where the developer can pay money rather than provide a unit even for the larger projects? Or,
Just-
or do people feel otherwise? We always should get the unit.
Well,
Um,
Like
I think
getting
there's
you-
some,
who's for always getting the unit? All right, who's for having some arrangement where you get the money?
I think there's some benefit to having some flexibility.
Okay, it looks like we have more support for having at least some arrangement to get the money. So now that's a charge, not that we have to have our staff write it out in great detail in the report, but just a paragraph to say that we are, want to explore. This
Can I
concept.
just clarify my thought about it? Just, I'm agreeing with you that under 6, you should be willing to get the money, and that over 6, you should require the unit, but have some discretion. That's
Mhm.
what I would say.
Yes,
Okay, sounds like.
I agree with Rhonda.
everybody's nodding on that.
I agree with
Okay,
Rhonda.
Agree.
all right, then we'll move on.
Can I add something, Jean? I think
Yeah.
it's also part of it is understanding where that money is going to and who's managing the money, right?
Housing trust.
We were talking
Right,
about. the
but
affordable-
Housing
how
trust.
that's being managed, because if our housing trust hasn't been as active, because this is all, this is gonna make it more active, let's say. So how that money is allocated would sway my way of saying, should it be a unit or should it be?
Well, I think we're going to be talking about the Affordable Housing Trust later too in this. So
Which needs
Um,
funding.
there was a lot of support expressed for having a bigger role for the Affordable Housing Trust. So, and number 2, this was a recommendation on changing from SRA to SRB zoning on Hunting Road, Clark Road, and Rolling Lane. Certain parts of town where there's a development at a smaller lots, but the area is zoned for acre zoning. Ed Cosgrove suggested at our October 27th meeting that we should eliminate this as a recommendation, because it just would be, I guess, complicated town meeting approvals. Even if we're not bringing that right before town meeting, at the same time, we're bringing other things, people might cite it and, look at what they're trying to do, I suppose, is Ed's thinking. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Ed. And so, this is, the idea is, it's possible a couple of extra new lots could be created in these areas if we rezoned in this manner. And is that so bad? What's wrong with having a few extras, 10,000 square foot, single family lots? But the question is, should this recommendation be kept in the housing plan as it is now? Renumbered under a new heading and kind of added for further study. It's on page 37. It's not in the roadmap now, actually. I was looking for it and I couldn't find it. But on page 37, it simply says, it's on the list, the list of proposed zoning changes.
It says, yeah,
Other zoning changes not specific to transit station districts. And then it lists 4 parts of town. And it's a recommendation essentially to rezone these designated areas currently zoned SRA to SRB. So should we take that out? Should we leave it in, but make it kind of put it in a separate section for further study? I think that's the question, isn't it, Oscar?
Yes, that's the question. And I would simply say, I think what we're making here is a document that is providing thoughts and recommendations on zoning changes to be considered. But when various pieces of these recommendations are taken up by planning board to bring as articles to town meeting, obviously you're going to pick the things that are the most important for MBTA, ADUs, the low hanging fruit. So I don't think we take it out, but we put it in a section because I think we've indicated that there's an issue and it's worth thinking about, but it's not going to essentially evolve into an article right now. But that's right? I mean, this is a report. Not everything coming out of this report is going to become an article to be voted on by town meeting.
Right. Right now,
Right.
it's listed in a recommended, along with other very important changes that we do want to make in the next few years. It's listed as a recommended rezoning.
Does it make
And Ed,
sense?
what do you think of Oscar's idea that we,
I think Oscar's idea has good merit.
okay,
And I would go for that.
all right. So we'll keep it in, but we'll move it over. It won't be listed as a proposed rezoning. It will be listed as something for further study.
Can we, can we
Karen?
include, I'm sorry, can we include that instead, take it out of the MBT community guidelines and put it in that strategy that's related to rezoning and other appropriate locations? You know, there's a whole.
Yeah, we
strategy
can.
on rezoning
Do we have
and
that?
other appropriate
um,
locations, not in the plan.
Actually, in the,
You're saying in the roadmap, right?
It's in the roadmap and it's the narrative, because the narrative.
In the
mimics
narrative-
roadmap. So in the roadmap
narrative,
too,
where,
there's a separate strategy on zoning and other appropriate locations. Why don't we just add it to that?
no, Karen,
Yeah.
that's in the roadmap, but I couldn't find it in the text.
It is.
Am
in
I
the
missing
text.
it somehow?
It's in the text, under zoning. It's in, number 5 or something.
Let's
Okay.
remember that it's the planning
Oh,
board's job to
excuse me,
take these.
Karen. Yes, consider
These-
options for promoting development in appropriate locations. Yes, that, I suppose, that's exactly where it belongs. All right, that's because that is kind of a further study section of the, okay, so we move it into there in the text. And then in the, we'll make sure that it's appropriate. It's just covered with in the roadmap with that kind of further study. Okay, so we're all set with that then. And then now I'm turning to the second.
Heidi, you had something?
Oh, did somebody else have a comment?
Heidi.
No, it's fine. I think that solution is fine. I just want us to remember that we're just writing the report and we're writing the recommendations. The planning board has a different charge, which is to bring articles changing zoning to town meeting. It's their decision what and how to do that. I would think that they would, along with the select board, would put the DHCD guidelines together and leave everything else out separate, but that's their charge, not ours.
Yes.
So I think we make our recommendations and leave it at that.
Mhm. Yeah, that we have the near term as in the roadmap, we identify things as near term. And this kind of thing would not be a near term by any means. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm turning to comments that were made by the League of Women Voters. It's item 3, but then it runs over to the second page. About the Affordable Housing Trust and how the Affordable Housing Trust should have a more prominent role in our town and so forth. It's the affordable. It's not as if we ignore the Affordable Housing Trust in our plan. Under capacity building strategies, page 67 to 68. We talk about, we give the background of the Affordable Housing Trust concept, the legal framework for it being created in 2017 under Massachusetts general law. And then talk about the Needham Affordable Housing Trust and what it does. And that's all we do. We don't make any recommendations for strengthening the Affordable Housing Trust or changing its role. Am I mistaken, Karen? That's all I,
It's in the narrative, under building local support and collaboration. There is a section specific to the Affordable Housing Trust, and it makes recommendations regarding representation and roles and responsibilities.
Okay, wait a minute.
Revisiting the mission statement, looking at revisiting roles and responsibilities vis-a-vis the implementation of the housing plan. So there are, and it talks about other activities the Housing Trust might consider. It talks about the activities the Housing Trust has been undertaking. So that's in the narrative.
It is, okay, I believe you, but all I saw.
Under capacity building, I think it's the last recommendation.
Capacity building strategies,
Boost local
looking at
support.
the introductory words on page 67.
Well, look under, it's the recommendation on boosting local support and regional collaboration. It talks a lot about kind of coalition building, and it focuses.
Oh, excuse me, I think I did find it on page 71, under monitor targeted housing goals. It says, the Affordable Housing Trust should take the lead on an annual monitoring of progress with respect to implementation of the plan, with staff support from the Department of Public Planning and Community Development.
But there's another recommendation at the end that also really does greater focus on affordable.
Okay,
housing.
so that's the
Boost local
bottom
support.
line is, we've already done this. It's in our,
Yeah, I mean, people might want to have more.
oh, excuse me, here we are, page 73.
I guess, Jean, the question is, does anybody object to what's written in right?
I don't
on
think
page
anybody objects. I think the league was calling for a strong affordable housing trust. And I think if I'm very sorry I missed these sections, but those who were involved in writing them know better than I do that we've already addressed that. We're all set. I think that's
Okay.
the answer. Okay. There is a suggestion on page 176. It's on, first of all, on the plan, it's on page 49, and this is, we should study the inclusion of allowing two-family dwellings in all residential areas. It's under the section that calls for needing further study. It's also mentioned in the roadmap as needing further study. Should we keep that in? Or is that only going to make people, wait a minute?
Well,
We're
again,
talking about ADUs and they're not going to change this into a two-family. Why are we talking about this? Anyway, I'm presenting a negative
can we-
article.
can
Oscar,
we
yes.
separate, can we separate from what let's not like self-regulate ourselves here or overthink or predict what's going to come to town meeting. We are charged with making recommendations for how we address housing in this town, creating more opportunities for more housing. That's a critical part of what's going to have to come down the road as a tough discussion. So we cannot take that out. But that does, again, back to what Heidi said, the planning board is going to extract from this document what is necessary to go forward as articles and make bylaw changes. So I think we're still charged with raising issues and creating suggestions and recommendations and bringing things to people's attention for further discussion, whatever.
Be
So,
further studied, yeah.
right? I mean, this is
I
a
agree.
huge issue and it's a lightning rod for lots of discussion, but that's not our problem, right? Our problem is to create a book or a document that is addressing honestly, openly, aggressively, thoughtfully, whatever. How do you address housing in this town?
Okay.
Period.
And
Right.
the
We're not
notes,
here to
the
do all the
notes,
details at this moment. We're here to suggest things for the planning board to review, and
Mhm.
and come to a consensus. It looks like Ed Cosgrove has his hand up also.
Yeah, and.
Again,
one-
I'm gonna support Oscar. I agree with him. I think, we should put these ideas in the report and then let the appropriate boards, planning board, for example, have the discussion and make the decision as to where to go and how to actually proceed with the idea or not.
Right. They may never bring it up, but,
Okay.
right.
Okay, good. Thank you, Ed. I think
Thanks,
we
Ed.
ready to move on, and nobody else seemed to have any further concern on that. Another needing further study is this idea that we should be supporting a state law for transfer taxes. That is, I know Nantucket is taking the lead on this, where they have a very, very expensive houses that are sold there. And that they also have people who desperately can't afford to live there and yet provide services and so forth for the community. But other communities, particularly on Cape Cod, actually are supporting this. We could have a transfer tax so that multi-million-dollar houses pay a special fee when they're sold, and then that fee goes to the town and can be used for affordable housing. It's only a question of whether we want to put it in the report that we support this and would like the town to advocate for it.
Again, I think we should leave it in because I think it needs further discussion. Ed, it looks like your hand is up.
Again, I'm agreeing. It should
Okay,
stay in
Yeah.
there and let the appropriate boards have the continued discussion.
okay, good.
I'm wondering, and Jean, I'm just thinking out loud here. If we have to get through 50 items in the next hour,
I
are
know,
there
I'm,
some that, no, but are there some that are controversial that we want to address, and then others that, if we don't hear from anyone, that maybe they just remain? I'm just trying to figure out if I want to make sure that we get to the ones that people disagree on.
okay,
Do the
well,
town meeting.
the next one I'm going to go on to is something that there is some controversy about,
Okay.
and that is tear downs. We present a lot of different ideas that could give us better control over tear downs. John Bullion was the first to speak at the community meeting, and he spoke in opposition to any stricter zoning restrictions on tear down activity. So do we want to keep, we have a variety of suggestions in our housing plan for how we could address tear downs. Rhonda, do you want to speak to that? And should we leave them in and leave them as is?
Rhonda, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. John did, but people following it were very positive about the idea of tear downs and controlling them. I think that it's absolutely something we want. I think of all, we definitely want more study and more thoughts. I thought the person who volunteered from the Historic Society saying that, there's a 6-month demolition delay, but it really doesn't solve the problem at all, that even historic buildings can be demolished very easily. I think that's, we're not only saving affordable housing, but I think we want to make sure we save historic housing in the town.
And I thought that section was very well written with good background and good suggestions. I just wanted to put it out, because we did get some negative comment, but if people are satisfied to leave it the way it is, with all of the various ideas set forth for possible action as the years go on, then that's
Jean,
what we'll do.
I think we should leave it in, and just to let everyone know, I'm on the Climate Action Plan Committee, the CAPC, and I'm the chair of the zoning group, and Oscar and Lee, and there are 2 others, Justin from the engineering, and Dave
Yeah.
Roche are all on it. And they apparently there was a 2-year discussion on the big houses. And there were some bylaws that were changed mildly. But it's something that this group is bringing up also because it has to do with the sustainability of the town. So I think leaving it in here and having, a broader discussion with different committees that are also reviewing it is worth doing.
Mhm.
I would
Okay.
actually say we should actually form a tear down mitigation working group, frankly. I think it would be worth doing to try and solicit some feedback from the real estate broker community, talk to homeowners, talk to any other concerned groups in town. We heard a lot of comments to address tear downs. So I think we've heard a lot, and I agree with everybody that's supporting keeping this in.
Mhm, mhm. And just seeing what we say on the recommendation, that the town consider further regulatory changes, revisit the zoning requirements of neighboring towns. I'm looking for anything that has to do with
Form a working group.
with the working group.
Yeah, if we form a working group, then that group can focus on that.
And yeah, talk to.
No, it's
talk to-
right there.
It's
As
in the
with the
plan.
case- as was the case with the large house, because it goes into the history of this issue. The planning board might consider appointing a new working group. So there it is.
Yep.
Okay, so we're all good with that. The next one is a simple one, number 10. There was in our plan, it says we should consider waiving permit fees for developments that have, I assume, any development that has an affordable unit. We would waive permit fees.
And that's also part of the planning board review, right? Like just to understand the fee
Yeah, and
discussion
it's-
on that.
I mean, occasionally, the planning board takes it on its own initiative to waive a special permit fee. Because of the particular projects, it seems to be in the public interest, like the farmer's market, for example. I think we waived the permit fee.
Right.
So boards do that from time to time. There was some objection stated to having any kind of policy on waiving fees, or anything like, in any of the bylaws, saying that we would definitely waive fees.
Yeah, that was, I think John Bullion as well, who wanted to, make sure that if we were waiving fees, that we acknowledge that we would be losing money for the town and how, that we had to do it thoughtfully.
And
We
it's
also have to incentivize, and I see Heidi has her hand up also.
Yeah, oh, Heidi, yes, Heidi.
Yeah, I think we should keep it in. I don't think we have to establish the policy. Just keep it in because we need as much flexibility as we can to incentivize people to
Just
make these
keep
kinds of
it in.
developments.
Okay, keep it in as.
Good to have in our
have it
toolbox.
as something to consider. So,
Right.
yeah, all right.
And Jean, excuse me 1 second, the tree preservation that was brought up, that's also being talked about in the zoning group. So that's something that is being discussed as well.
Yeah, I just passed over that because although I.
Yeah, no, I
had
agree.
those, they seem to be addressed at the meeting without a need for a further discussion.
Correct.
Yeah, so I just passed over it.
Mhm.
So Mo handled, this is an important issue. It is, you may recall, I think it was sent around several months ago, a Newton study of local preference.
Mhm.
When you have affordable units and they're to be rented or sold, DHCD does allow a local preference, and it's for people who live in the town already, or who work in the town, or work for the town, or whose children go to the local schools. And we have the highest preference that they allow at 70%. So there's pros and cons on that. The con, as I recall from the Newton study, is that it affects racial distribution on the units. The local preference units are less apt to end up being purchased or rented by African-American people Asian people, Hispanic people as compared with white people. So Mo Handel, however, spoke in opposition to reducing local preference. I think I didn't write down what exactly his thinking was, but I guess the idea is you're meeting a local need. This housing is going to be available for somebody who has some connection to the town. That's a good thing. And then, excuse me, there was somebody else who said the opposite. Let's see. Wait, I'm losing my place here. Oh, yeah, item 21, another person spoke on the same issue, Marion Cooley. Marion Cooley, in contrast, expressed support for reducing our current 70% local preference. It should be saying it should be, in fact, she even said this shouldn't be a medium term, a long-term thing. We should be addressing this in the short term. Our housing plan listed as a medium-term initiative. So you have these pros and cons. Shall we leave it in the way we have it?
Yes, I think so. I
yes.
see Heidi and Rhonda have their hands up.
Yes.
Okay,
Oh, Rhonda.
Rhonda?
So we have it in that we're going to give up our local preference.
No, what we have it in is that we'll study it. I guess what we mean is similar to the way Newton studied it. What
Okay.
difference is it making?
Okay,
on-
that's fine.
I think that's what we all came up with. We didn't really know if it was how negative or how positive
Right.
changing it would be until
I
we
think I
know.
missed the meeting where we talked about that. So thank you. That's fine. That's
Yeah.
fair.
Okay, so local, the idea that we're going to have a study of it is okay, but we're not necessarily going to change it to a short term. We have to study this right now. It's a medium term is fine. Okay. So now we go to, let's see what the next thing is so I can make sure it's a really important one. This is very important because it was mentioned many times. We must study impacts. On the other hand, as I read the report, the plan very closely, we say that we're going to study impacts. I think we say that already. And what we say is we will study these impacts at the time of rezoning or at the time of a particular project proposal, and probably twice. I don't know what more we have to say. This was also raised at the recent planning board meeting. And our response was, at the stage where we're writing a housing plan, we're not going to hire consultants to study the traffic impacts, the school impacts. When we're actually going before town meeting to actually ask for the rezoning, we may want to do that, but not now. And that's pretty much what we say in the report.
That's
Is
correct.
that okay?
Well, I think the
No.
one, yeah,
Yeah.
the one thing
Okay,
I would add
Emily?
is that.
Emily?
this-
I'm sorry, she had
Sorry,
her
go ahead,
hand.
Emily.
Sorry, sorry, Oscar. The one time I did raise my hand. I think it's a general concern across the plan that we hear, and we're hearing it here too, which is we're saying these things, but there's not really clear how it's going to happen or who's going to be responsible for it. And so I think we just hear that with this as well. You know, what do you mean you're going to study? Who's going to study? How's going to study? You know, I don't want this to be, you know, a year from now and nobody studied anything because nobody knew it was their job to study it. So I think it's just this general theme. I hear what you're saying, Jean, you know, for this particular project, we will study the traffic, but I think there's a whole bunch of things that we say and it's not clear who's going to do them. And I think that's just kind of, this is one of those things.
Yeah, well, perhaps I could get a response from either Lee Newman or Karen on whether the language that we have in the plan could be more precise about.
Karen has her hand up, Jean.
Yeah, who
I
does?
wanted to say that
Erin.
besides studying
Karen.
impacts at the point of rezoning or at the point of looking at a project, which you pretty much do already. Planning board does that on a regular basis. There is also some suggestions of being more proactive and studying certain aspects of potential future development that are included, they're embedded in that, in the narrative under that recommendation, that strategy. That's generally kind of the purview of the select board. Similar to the parking study that they're undertaking right now, there are some other examples. I think Oscar made a suggestion about doing something more proactive about looking at some impacts of future development along that whole spine, that economic corridor. So we have embedded some language regarding more comprehensive studies instead of project specific ones in the draft. Just wanted to raise that.
Do you think in response, Karen, to the comments that were made, that we need to make any edits to the section on impact studies?
No, I think we need to acknowledge that this is a really important issue, but if anybody wants to read and think that we should strengthen language, but I think that we put it out there that it's an important issue that has to be addressed.
Do you think identifying the planning board as the entity that generally does studies in connection with rezonings
I
and
think
in
it's
connection
included
with-
as lead entity with the select board. I have to go back, but I think we have the planning board included.
Oh, we
in
do. Okay, then, all right, Oscar, do you want to make a
Well,
comment? on
my
that?
one other thought, and Michael probably has a thought on this too. I think when there was an initial proposal about the school planning for expansion, the comment was raised, I think Mary Ann asked whether or not the MBTA communities, impact of the MBTA communities was taken into consideration with the school projections. And it was acknowledged that it was not. And that was back in March or whatever. But I think the point is, I think we understand the school is actually quite aware of looking at new data, being aware of the MBTA. And so I think, yes, the select board is probably the point person so that they then make sure that various committees get coordinated in town, the various administrative groups to coordinate all of the impacts, from infrastructure to schools. So we're proactive. That's all. So, I mean, I think we basically said all that, but whether we want to, create that discussion or description, maybe we just fine tune it a little bit.
And thank you, Oscar. To
Michael.
add to that, since I'm mentioning on the schools, that is something that is now being looked at certainly more closely. And at our upcoming school committee meeting later this month, we are going to be hearing sort of an update of, there are 4 different plans that are being proposed in terms of this big master plan. And we'll get more insight in terms of how that is being impacted by the MBTA planning there. So
Right.
What's the
bringing
date
it
of
up.
that meeting, Michael?
it's either at this next meeting on the 13th or the 20th meeting. It's going to be on the agenda.
Oh, 13,
It'll be
Orange Box
discussed
for
this
me.
month. Yes, at our next.
We'll have to be on the lookout for that. It occurred to me that since we're talking about applying the apartment A1 zoning in all, a bunch of other parts of town, it's easy to study those developments that have been built in the 80s under apartment A1 zoning and see how many kids come from those developments. I hope that would be my primary question to the one who's doing the study. This is you got a laboratory right here in town of 5 developments. How many kids,
And to add to that as well, at our meeting on the 13th, we will also get an update from our demographic organization that we liaise with regarding our enrollment projections through fiscal year 2038. So if anyone wants to tune into that, that will be on Tuesday evening at 6:30.
very good. Yeah, definitely we need to pay attention to this. And I think I think the plans mentions the work that's being done by the school department at the present time, doesn't it, Karen?
Yes,
Yeah, we definitely acknowledge that important work. Well, all set with that issue?
No, sorry,
No,
one
okay.
more final comment. I think in response to John Bullion and others, they are asking for, have we done any targets or projections for goals for housing production? And I think that is something that's really critical for us to figure out how that gets addressed. Maybe that's something that's going to be worked on by Lee. Maybe there's a consultant who can be hired, who we can work on how we analyze the different kinds of housing that we need, the different groups that we're serving, and the various income levels, and then look at what we think the target projections are, independent of what, the number of 1784 for the MBTA. That's a number, that's 20 years, whatever it is, and it's not even expected to be built. But I think somehow we need to do that, and that would be very helpful for a lot of reasons. And I think we've already discussed it, but I think that's also linked to understanding impacts, because how do you study impacts if you don't know what you're reacting to? So I think if we can create, or a consultant or something can come up with some projections on the kinds of housing, families, kids, all that stuff, it would be great. We're running out of time on our committee, but it's a critical next step. And I think
Well, I
that
know
that will lead
that-
into helping all of the groups in town understand what they're getting prepared for.
Well, the housing plan does set target goals, as I recall, and that a large percentage of our future housing production should be rental and that sort of thing.
But we need to address all of the different kinds of housing, not just the NHA or the low income or the moderately priced. We have to project on $1 million small condos, clusters, housing for people with disabilities, seniors, right? I mean, there's so many different kinds of housing that I don't necessarily think all necessarily falls under that 20-80 split, right? Maybe there's going to be I don't know. I just think there's a little more sophistication to how we create a
Or
projection.
does the housing plan at the present time say enough about the need for such targets and goals? I know we do say, have words about it.
Yes, we don't have numbers, really.
Uh-huh.
Right? I mean, I know we have a little piece that was nice that was created that is the what we would address as the number of units that if we were to say we're going to be true to our affordable component of 10%, we're going to create whatever it was, 360 something or 80 something units. But I think there's a lot of other kinds of housing that don't fall under that category, right? That are housing that's meeting other needs and other community groups in town. So I guess it's just it's another.
there's a question in how do you define needs though? And so we do have information on unmet needs based on cost burdens across wide incomes, including incomes of over 100% AMI. But how you define needs for
Well, how many group home, how many units we're going to create for people with disabilities over the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? How many senior housing units of X percentage are we going to create? How many family units? How many single family workforce? All those, what are our goals? How do we come up with?
There are some special needs units included in that matrix. We haven't. And there are, by bedroom size, you're assuming that some of the smaller units are going to be more for special needs and for seniors. But we can talk about fine tuning some of these.
Yeah.
But the question for us right now is what amendments need to be made to this draft housing plan so that in a couple of weeks we can approve it. And is the language that we have now with regard to goals sufficient, or are we directing Karen to write stronger language at this time? Are we okay with what we have? Okay. Then I'm looking at the very last comment from the from the community meeting, another comment by Holly Charbonnier on the concern about the design review board. And I think what she means is that unlike the planning board, which has operating under legal requirements with regard to special permits, where we have hearings and people have an opportunity to express, you know, and are heard. The design review board is not a creature of state law and doesn't have to have hearings, and meets itself and the members of the board applying often their very competent and helpful professional expertise, take a look at the plan and then advise the planning board or the zoning board of appeals on changes they recommend to the design or to the landscaping. Always very helpful. But she's saying, should we say something about the role of the design review board? The only thing we say about the design review board is we discuss on page 32 the fact that site plan review is allowed by the under the MBTA guidelines. Now, site plan review in our bylaw generally is talked about in the context of a special permit. We probably need to review and revise our site plan approval, especially to address site plan approval for these developments that have to be allowed by right under the MBTA Communities Act. We don't really say very much about that. I wonder if it isn't necessarily the same issue Holly Charbonnier was focused on, but in page, perhaps in page 32, when we talk about site plan approval, there should be some paragraph about the need to revise our zoning bylaw to introduce particular site plan review process addressed to multifamily development, you know, in connection with these rezonings.
I think that's a good idea.
It's just that it's something, I guess it's really my own idea. I'm not attributing it to Holly here, but it made me think that we do need that. And we definitely do need that. I don't think our current site plan review procedures will work for these developments. And then with regard to accessory dwelling units, and that's on page 39 to 42, and on page 41 we talk about the role of the design review board. Now this we kind of made this up. I don't think we've even discussed it with the design review board, which is a bit of a failing perhaps on our part. But the idea is, with accessory dwelling units, who's going to decide if the unit as proposed continues to have the appearance of a single family home? And we suggested that would be the role of the design review board.
Jean, can I add something? We just nominated someone for the design review board because someone is coming off. In the process of it, we had some of the candidates ask questions about the purview of the design review board. The design review board has no purview on residential. They only have purview on multifamily and larger projects. Is that correctly? I just want to make sure that the commercial projects.
Well, right now, that's what their role is. I mean, they're reviewing signs and they're reviewing site plan approvals, but they're not reviewing individual homes.
No one in town is reviewing individual homes except for zoning for setbacks and us, I guess. Well, no, I mean, I guess the question is, in general, the design review board, which is put together by the planning board and the select board, does not require any review of new housing. A single family housing or housing in general, I think, is what I understood from Mark Glusing. So it's just something that needs to be reviewed. I mean, if that's a piece of this, and
Sure.
with the big house review or with, you know, with CAPC, you know, trying to get more sustainable, solar and things like that on the houses, we have to understand if we want any type of review. Houses
Well,
of a certain size
the
or something.
only context in which we mention this, the site, the design review board in our housing plan is in connection with a review of accessory dwelling units. If we get away from the special permit from the ZBA, then who would decide whether the building retains the look and the appearance of a single family home? An alternative, I really think that goes beyond what the building inspector would feel comfortable doing.
Bless you.
The
It
alternative,
does.
I went to the, I forget the agency, it wasn't MAPC, it was a webinar on site plan approval in the context of the MBTA Communities Act. And what was said was that site plan approval can also be provided by professional planning staff. It doesn't need to be an appointed board. So that, it seems, would be the alternative in our recommendations on accessory dwelling units. It would be to have the planning staff make a determination
Wait a minute,
on the look of the thing, or have the design review board.
I see Heidi's hand is up and then Karen.
Yeah, thank you. I very much appreciate it.
No, I'm just trying to, yeah, I'm trying to make sure.
Yeah, Heidi. Yes,
My
please.
question is actually about not about design review. It's just, I thought the changes that we were making to ADUs in general was that they would be
Part of the bylaw.
in the house by right and outside of the house by special permit. I don't recall.
Yes, there would be, unless we take out the phrase about retaining the appearance of a single family home,
Yeah, I would be in
which is
favor of
kind of a
that.
judgment thing.
I think
um,
that's a snooty part of that bylaw. I
It's
don't like
what?
that at all. If you want to talk about classist, I think that's a terribly snooty part of the bylaw, and I would be in favor of getting rid of that.
Just get rid of that. huh?
I would be in favor of getting rid of the whole, like, let's pretend that we don't have an ADU. It's
Uh-huh.
nobody's business, as long as it, nobody else, according to Natasha, nobody else is getting checked on the
Nobody's getting
aesthetic
checked.
design of the house. Why should this be any different? If we're loosening it up, it should be loose. People want their house to look nice. People want to live in a nice apartment. I don't understand why this specific item is getting special attention that no other house in Needham gets. I don't think that's fair. In addition to which, I think the whole point of the change that we're trying to make is to make it a change
Make
by
it more
right,
And make it more
allowable
equitable.
by right.
Mhm.
And this defeats that purpose. So I think that phrase should come out and the design review board should go hit the road
So
too.
what do
looks
you
like-
recommend? What's the appropriate vehicle then for, so just go through a special permit for a
We have,
detached unit?
I mean, we're gonna make people comply with zoning, right?
So I think Dave Roach would always have the ability to kick it to the planning board if he thought that there was some issue
If
with
it
it.
didn't comply with zoning. So we'll
Well,
have to be careful writing our zoning.
It's
can I
the
just-
zoning board of appeals currently that grants the
Right.
special permit.
Karen, it looks like you've had your hand
Yeah.
up too, and then Rhonda.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and there are, all the bylaws that I've looked at over the years on ADUs and continue is that in a by right situation, it's the building commissioner, and no other community has had a design review board review. It adds an extra layer of bureaucracy. And I think that Dave Roach is more than capable of actually making these determinations. And we don't even need planning board in here, you just defer to Dave Roach. That would be, based on what I've seen and what has been working, makes sense.
Well,
But
why don't we
my
do
two cents.
this? Why don't we do this? Why don't we, as soon as we possibly can, speak with Dave Roach. Lee, will you speak with Dave Roach as to whether if we left in that language on looks like a single family home, I'm not using the exact words, is he comfortable being able to make that decision?
Sure.
And if he is comfortable, then Well, Heidi suggested we just take the language out.
But why
But-
are we giving him that authority?
Yeah, why
Make
does
that
he, when none
decision.
of, none of the other houses do, so
Why-
you can have.
Yeah,
a
we're not reviewing
multi-million
any
dollar
of the
I
house
think
that-
what we're saying, it's not really by right if somebody has to agree to it like that.
And
Right.
it's the decision of one person. I think that's really arbitrary. I don't like that idea.
All right, then. I
Sorry.
think we're gonna go in a different direction here. We're gonna go in a
Right
different
to the
direction
point.
here. We have rules that say you can't put in a new door that's front facing. That's very objective. No new door that's front facing. The idea is that makes it look like a two-family. So we get rid of that subjective, looks like a single-family home.
Okay, but
and
Jean,
just
wait.
have straight,
People have many front-facing doors on their homes already. I mean, most
yeah,
people
the
have
way
a
it's
side door
worded,
that
if
is
you
front
already
facing.
have a front-facing door, you can use it to access the ADU. But you
I don't-
can't put in
I-
a new front-facing door.
But
What?
Oh, Heidi's frozen. Oh, you're back.
I-
Heidi, you were frozen.
I think we're putting too much judgment on this. The question is, we're putting in a housing plan, not making the determination
Okay,
about the thing. Personally, I think I've made my views very clear, won't elaborate, but I do think that we need to.
I think we
this
need to
is something
review
that we
it.
need to revisit because this is something we're trying to get to town meeting this.
okay, then I think
And-
we
but-
should eliminate the wording about referring to the design review board. If we have no intention of doing that, then there's no reason to have that wording. It only raises issues.
And Rhonda
right.
has had her hand up, so I just want to
And
make
we'll
sure
leave
that she
everything
gets to
else
speak.
the way we had it. Rhonda?
Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, yeah.
I think the ADUs really scare me more than they scare everyone else. I just think that when in doubt, you're going to get developers who are going to do the worst possible thing that they can do. And zoning and setbacks are not, it's already clear. I mean, this is why we're all worried about the demolition issues, because the houses that are getting built are literally maxing out sizes. Now think about if you put an ADU, and I know they're limited, somebody's talking 900. We need to think about keeping them small. We do need to make sure that the neighbors are not going to be miserable when these things get added onto somebody's house. There does need to be control for our town to look the way we want it to look. We do want to have, just having it be zoning and have somebody put up something horrifying because they don't have, they're just putting on an in-law apartment on their house and they don't really care what it looks like because that's their goal. I just think we do need to be sensitive to the fact that yes, you want to create more housing. I'm all for it. I want there to be opportunities, but I also don't think that it's fair to people and neighbors in the neighborhood for people to have no limits other than zoning, because and maybe it's size and maybe it's the door and maybe it's the driveway and maybe it's the lighting, where lighting goes, because that's another thing is that people put up lights because there's another house and all of a sudden you have that's affecting the neighbors if the lots are small. I do believe in design review. As a person who does development, there is some benefit to making sure that places look the way you want them to. I think we've all seen unplanned communities and it's not pretty, in my opinion.
I think this,
Well, we
Jean, I
have,
think we should hold this off for a bigger discussion, either with the planning board or however it works, because I don't disagree with Heidi. I don't disagree with Ron. I think there has to be like a bigger conversation. And I want to make sure we have 15 minutes that we get through any other items that I think are, because I
should
think that's
we-
a super important one.
all right, so should we leave in the language we have now about looks like a single family home, but take out the concept of having the design review board review it? And I mean, later that could be introduced by the planning, but if that seems to be the only way to go with it. There are those who think we don't even need that language. Heidi expressed that. Then Rhonda is concerned that we
I think that's a great
do
idea.
need something like
I
that.
think what you suggested is fine, Gene.
I think what you're suggesting is great.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, good. So we'll just check out the reference to the design review board, and that will be a future decision when we go forward with those changes on how we.
Which includes the whole thing about size and 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, all of that is part of a discussion about what do we want to accomplish for the ADUs, and that's more detailed than we can do in our report.
Right.
Right, there may, in fact, I should have combined them, because I think later there's somebody who's saying we should. Well, we'll get to it when we get to it. Okay, this is a really important thing here on the next one, number 19, Matthew Borelli, Matt Borelli, a select board member, who also is a real estate developer. He said the 20,000 square foot minimum lot size for multifamily housing that we're proposing to comply with the MBTA Communities Act is too large. Site assembly is a big problem. Now, if you have 2,000, if you have only 1,000 square feet, I mean, excuse me, 10,000 square feet, which is a typical lot size for our town in its developed areas, that means you could develop a 4-unit apartment building. And the question is, and if, of course, if you have 20,000 square foot, you can have 8-unit apartment building. So I want to put something forward. We've got 2 ways of doing these apartment A1. One is the areas we've already got zoned apartment A1 and adding some areas and zoning it apartment A1, such as the Hillside School, the Stephen Palmer building. Let that be 20,000 square feet. You're talking about a big site to begin with. But if the apartment A1 zoning, it's an added use, like in our industrial areas on Hillside Avenue and Highland Avenue, like the Bertucci's Plaza area, Chestnut Street.
Yeah.
Should we go down to 10,000 square feet and let 4-unit buildings be built?
Yes.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean,
Yes. I think the intention of what we have been talking about, Jane, is that we want the metrics of the building, not the lot. So we want the height of the building, we want the density per unit, but that can be applied, as he's suggesting, on something less than 20, because as you know, we just come, yes, you could do 4 units on a lot, and that's great. And that hits your 15 units per acre density for your MBTA, but it's on a smaller lot.
yeah, and it could be less than 20, but more than 10, and you could be 6 units or something like that. All right, so if there's no objection to that change, and I think it's an important change, but it may be a good one.
Good.
To say in those districts, we're not going to copy the A1 zoning that's more appropriate on these more outskirt areas. We're going to have it the same, except for the lot size. The lot size will be 10,000 square feet. Okay. All
Gina,
right.
I have a question for you. I think there are a couple, I would suggest there are a couple of things that are also important. One is Stephen Palmer. Another one is the Needham Housing Authority, just to kind of get a feel for what people think about those two.
Yeah.
Then the third one.
Is there a controversy about there? What's the
Just
question?
to understand if
No.
everybody's okay with those 2 items, Needham Housing Authority, that one, and then I think that the just kind of, again, the accountability of how we're moving forward with this.
Well,
Thanks,
could you
Natasha.
point me to the number on the?
So I think I'd love to talk just about the Stephen Palmer for a second, which is number 22.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, I don't know if there's anything to do, but it was
There it
pretty
is, yeah.
clear that we proposed that they use Stephen Palmer for housing, and the select board said back, or Ms. Cooley said back,
Mhm.
not sure that that's going to happen, kind of thing. So I don't think there's anything for us to change in the plan. And in fact, I would say we shouldn't back down from that. Our charge is to do housing. It is housing right now. And that we should say that it should, that we will have a loss of housing if it goes away, like we're at a negative. So I think we should at a minimum be able to preserve what's there. And preferably be able to leverage it into more.
Okay,
Exactly.
so
That's
In
a
other
critical
words-
walkable site.
Critical.
what difference
It
does
is.
it make if it's zoned single family B as it is now, or apartment A1, as far as its future use? That's under the control of the select board. And
Yeah, I don't know if it makes a difference. They want to, she mentioned it might be used for open space or other things, right?
Well,
So-
we always look at Greensfield, and when I was on PPBC for many years, we always look at Greensfield, we always look at that site. Because again, it's a good site for other municipal buildings as well, including, so, I just wanna, I think we should leave it in the plan and just say, we would
I think-
encourage it, and
I
it's gonna
think the
come
point
up.
is it's just as important to not lose what we have.
Mhm. So we
Right.
not only say that it should be zoned apartment A1, we also say it, we would like to see it used for housing. I
I
believe we
think
said
that's
that.
what the
Continue
recommendation
to
is,
be used,
and
yeah.
then the
Yeah.
select board, I mean, and the,
Yeah.
there are different groups in town that have different feelings about it, but this particular group that is promoting housing and affordable housing should keep it in the plan, and it will be what it will be, right?
Okay, and so that's, and there was another issue you said we should make sure we turn to right away. What was it? The housing
Right, the
authority?
other-
What was
Yeah.
the issue regarding the housing authority?
There's, I think that's also me. I don't have an issue. I think I was just looking at their recommendations and their last ones, which are, I guess, under 40, but they're all kind of lumped in there. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is, we took out, they want, the Needham Housing Authority Board wants this plan to also say we support a whole bunch of different ideas at the state and local level.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
including-
Mhm.
And a few of these, I'm not sure I 100% support. So for example, number 2, where you have establish a new low-income housing tax credit preference for public housing preservation and production projects. We have a finite number of tax credit dollars. And actually, if we want to do a tax credit project in Needham, we're kind of working against ourselves then if we say we're going to prioritize. So, I just saying, I don't uniformly want to just pick these up and plop them into the plan just because the Needham Housing Authority says it's a good idea.
Right.
So
Are you talking about the ones that are on? the
I'm talking
sixth
about the
page?
last page of the whole thing. Page
Yeah.
8 says, a passage of H 1417, establish a new low-income housing tax credit, but support and champion the passage of proposed transfer tax
Oh,
bill. We talked
yes.
about that. But even things like number 6, moving to work Section 8 vouchers, promote an initiative. This isn't proposed right now. I mean, that's something
Yeah.
that could happen, but I think that some of this is a little bit fast and loose. Like the Section 8 moving to work is, being used for homeless youth right now and other things. Like we just need to be thoughtful, and I just didn't want to just pick these up and put them in
So,
there.
yeah, no, I agree, certainly. And number 4, that's number 40.
Yes, it's number 40, and
It
then
has
there's all
to
these
do with
numbers under.
deploying and turbocharging the Affordable Housing Trust, and then it lists all these things that the town should be supporting. So,
I
all
do
right,
think-
all
I do
right.
think, Jean, what you said at the bottom is somebody should look into these. Somebody should think about them. Somebody should educate people, and then we can decide whether or not
And
what
what
our
I
position
said
is on each of them.
is simply, should mention be made in the housing plan that a board or officer of the town should be responsible for keeping up with proposed changes in state law and regulations.
Yes, I
That's
think
all
that's a
we need
great
to
idea.
say.
Somebody should know these things and should be able to speak eloquently about them when people ask questions.
Yeah, and then the second question is, because they suggested that be the role for the Affordable Housing Trust. Should the Affordable Housing Trust be
I-
charged with this?
think-
or
I
should
think
we say
the
that?
larger question is, and sort of, again, we're like, so it's almost 9 o'clock. We have this meeting, and then I guess we have one more, and I feel like this big implementation, which includes the Affordable Housing Trust, this meaty topic still remains.
Okay. So we'll say
don't know.
that somebody in the town should be responsible, but we won't say it should be the Affordable Housing Trust.
Not
be
right
it.
this second, but I think our group probably needs to speak a little bit more about what we want the Affordable Housing Trust or somebody to do for all of these things.
Right, because it could be that the town hires someone beyond the housing trust. If the housing trust is only meeting once or twice a year, there might be, appetite for having someone lead this charge if it's important to the town, and that's something that the select board would have to review and all of that. So
Simply say that it's not clear at the present what board or officer of the town would be responsible for this, but
right,
this
Well,
is a concern. Is
I
that?
mean, I guess the question is, I think for this group and for this plan, do we want to say, hey, we think there should be somebody who is appointed to pay attention to everything in here, and make sure there's some, accountability of saying, hey, select board, this is on your list, and come back to me and I'm gonna nag you about it until I get response. Hey, planning board, this is on your list. Who is that linchpin? Who's the and do we say that in order to make any of these things happen in a cohesive way versus a piecemeal kind of everybody just kind of doing random things when they get to it, that we do need a champion. We need somebody who is
An implementer.
knowledgeable, an implementer, but also like a coordinator. They don't have to do everything themselves, but they
Yep.
need to know who's doing it and be able to go back to that person and hold them accountable and know, what's going on. So they need to really be the hub of knowing everything that's supposed to be happening and where that. So when we go and say, well, what's the status of this project? They'll say, oh, well, let me see. I know that this
So,
person.
We'll say that a board or officer of the town should be responsible for keeping up with these changes in state
I'm just
law and
proposing like,
regulations without saying who that board or officer is. Is that
well,
okay?
that's I guess a question. I'm saying like, should we name a board? Should we tell the town they need to hire a person? Should they, I'm kind of brainstorming with you all, like, what is the best strategy that we want to put forward? Do we, as Jean said, we think the town should nominate a board to do this. We think the town should hire a person who's a staff person who's responsible. We think, it's poor Lee's job, like we'll make Lee do everything. I mean, no offense, Lee, but so I'm sure Lee has thought, oh gosh, if everybody walks away, what is on my plate? And
Well,
I think it's fair.
I think we're running out of time, not only in our time frame for completing this report, this plan, because we'd have to put it off for another couple of months if we want to look into this, that, and the other. But we're running out of time in this meeting. So I don't know what more we can say.
Well, I think we've basically, right now, all the eggs are in the Affordable Housing Trust needs to be reimagined and reconfigured to be a monthly to bi-monthly force that will be the implementing, overseeing body. So I think what we're asking is do we provide an alternative to say that it could be a member or could be another board, but we think there are affordable housing trusts that are doing this.
So how about just saying something like, as I said, we need a board or officer of the town to be responsible for keeping up with proposed changes in state law and regulations. Perhaps it could be the Affordable Housing Trust. Kind of vague, but at least just a suggestion we throw out, okay?
Or, yeah.
We already have language in the plan about, the expanded role of the Affordable Housing Trust and specific language about the planning board with planning staff support, really kind of taking the lead on a vision for the community and some extra coordination. So
Yeah,
we do
well,
have some language in that, and
What
The-
Reg first?
the
I
town
would say
manager's
80
office is trying to arrange a meeting with on the Affordable Housing Trust to discuss this particular plan and implementation. So it is on the radar screen.
Okay,
But
and I
there-
think what all that Reg Foster was asking is that somebody be paying attention to what's happening on the state level with regard
Sure.
to law and regulations. And I don't think we say anything in our housing plan presently. And all we need
No,
is
I
a
think that's a
sentence.
great thing to add. I just think that you know, 80% of the comments we've got are, okay, when you guys walk away, what happens?
Right.
So
Right.
whether that's a Reg Foster comment or something, and I'm just trying to look at
For
that
the
beyond the
community.
Needham Housing Authority is, that's a good question. What do we want to say? Is there a blurb that we need to write that's a little bit more directive that says, here's how we, here's, you know, you guys can implement this however you want. Here are 2 ideas or something.
Right.
Or here's how they do it in Sudbury.
Okay, and Mr. Borelli, by the way, said he's hesitant to support liberalizing our ADU bylaw and hesitant about stronger regulation of tear downs. But I don't think in response to that, we're going to make any particular change. I just note that that was his opinion expressed at the select board meeting.
Yeah.
So
I think,
I think
Jean,
we
I mean,
already dealt with everything else on the select board meeting. And
Yeah.
now we're just at the planning board meeting. And the first thing had to do with impacts. We already talked about this. Oh, yes. This is something for the housing plan under item number 25, Mr. Block, Adam Block, the chair of the planning board, would like to see in the strip we've been talking about along Highland Avenue between May Street and Rosemary Street, where Sudbury Farms is and Bertucci's Plaza, that we, as we do on Chestnut Street, allow mixed use with 4-story buildings, you know, retail on the first floor, restaurants on the first floor, and 3 stories above. And that we copy that same zoning we have for Chestnut Street and bring it over to Highland Avenue. We also would, of course, allow standalone multifamily housing, as we've been discussing for a long time. Is that something we want to add at this stage to this plan?
I would be for it, but it's up to Karen if she thinks she can make that happen at the last minute. I like it. I think it's more urban and I think it gives us options.
And I'd be glad to help write it. I know exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah, if there's support for it, this is what this meeting's for, we'll add it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is there support for that? We have that.
I
zoning
agree.
in place for Chestnut Street. We
Yeah.
haven't had any projects yet in the 12 so years, 15 years we've had that zoning. But he's suggesting we have the same concept.
Why
for
three?
Highland
Why
Avenue.
3 stories?
Excuse me?
Why 3 stories?
Well, I think because it's more economically feasible. And Oscar, I recall having a discussion with you about this one time about mixed use. And when you have, you have the retail on the first floor and then you have the apartments above, isn't there a sort of an economy of scale if you only allow
Four.
2-story? You're very unlikely to have anybody come along and do it.
Well, it depends on the size of the
It-
site too, but
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
A little more height is always going to be beneficial for density and for
Right.
sort of therefore for economics.
I see Ed Cosgrove has his hand up also.
yes.
I-
and-
I agree with this for between May and Rosemary and allowing mixed use with multi-stories. And I don't see any problem with putting even 4 stories along there.
And then
In
on
that
Chestnut
region.
Street,
And-
it
and
requires a
it-
special permit, so.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to make something if you want to make development feasible, if you make it high, if you give height and you give a setbacks from the street, or you can even put it up as part of the curb, that's what's going to make it feasible. Basically, you can go up you can go up 5 floors over a podium, and that's still wood, and that's your prime number.
Yeah.
And there's
So
also
the-
a dip in that area, that between the high school and I see Lee has her hand up and
Oh, yes, Lee.
I'm
oh,
muted.
now you're muted.
Okay, sorry.
Now you're
wrong-
fine. We can hear
You're
you.
good.
Okay, good. Sorry. I was gonna say, this is the block that we talked about studying, Gene, for a long time. This was a
Mhm.
business district originally. It's the only business district left in Needham. And we had talked about, there was a study that was done back in the early 70s and the zoning didn't get changed. We actually talked about, though, extending more the rules that we have in Needham Center to this block as opposed to Chestnut Street. Because Chestnut Street was the zoning for that was really kind of oriented more toward an automobile and recognizing the more automobile related uses along that section. So we talked about actually using more of the center zoning with the overlay within the center that allowed you to go up to 4 stories, because in the center there are 2 zones. There's a 3-story zone and a 4-story zone. So I think the idea was to actually utilize more of the underlying zoning that you have in Needham Center, and then enable an overlay that mirrored the overlay we have in Needham Center, which allows for the 4 stories.
So
Okay,
Lee, to
that's
that
the-
point,
That's the way to do it, but there's no
Well-
reason why we can't put it in the plan as something we recommend.
okay, that's good, but if we want that to be MBTA, contiguous parcel, we can't have, it's got to be by right. So,
Well,
The
we've
the-
tried-
the standalone multifamily would also be a use allowed by right in that zone. This
Okay,
this
so-
would be exactly
so
the
the
same. as
math,
Chestnut Street.
okay, so that's fine. So
Yep.
especially, so it's
Yeah.
basically it's a new thing for us because we took the downtown overlay district out of the MBTA districts so that it would have the discretion to not have standalone, but have the
That's-
mixed use, blah, blah, blah. So this is going to be standalone by right and then mixed use 4-story special permit.
With
Right.
basically the underlying rules you have in the center as opposed to on the Chestnut Street district. Yeah, so it's a composite.
All right, so it sounds like it's okay if we include that in, and I can help write it, and Lee, of course, you know exactly what we're talking about. You know, we can all work together to get that in.
And Jean,
so,
we're past where it's not almost 9:10. What, how do we want to?
There's. Oh, let me think, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's really not much more, but I don't know how much, I'll just try to go through it as quick as I can. Number 26, that was a planning board meeting. The mention was made that we need to have some reference to site plan review. We don't have time to write up standards for site plan review and have them in this plan.
But you made a comment. Yeah,
Oh, we say something about the need for it.
yes.
That's all. And I think we discussed that in earlier numbered item. And then on 27 on mitigation, we, again, that's something that we would put in the site plan review. And all I said is such ideas can be considered when a site plan review process is studied for multi-family projects. So that's what we're saying. So now Bob Smart had a long thing, and basically the answers were, yeah, we already do that. We already have that. We already have that. So that's all I said about all the things that Bob Smart said. You can read what I said. The Needham Housing Authority from Reg Foster, some items that really don't have anything to do with housing authority. He thinks we should go from 850 square feet to 900 square feet for ADUs and from 1 bedroom to 2 bedroom, like Wellesley. I think we should keep it the way it is and make as few changes as we can to try to get through town meeting. What do people think?
I kind of like this.
You like then? Well, I don't mind the 900 square feet. I really
I
don't.
like the 2-bed because I had a 2-bed for there was 800. So, you know, it kind of makes sense. It's such a head scratcher to be 850 in a 1-bed. But I don't know if we want to. I like it.
Okay.
But
Does anybody else
anybody else like
Lee,
it?
I see Lee's hand is up. Is it from the
Lee?
last time?
Yeah,
Oh, you're on mute, Lee.
It's from the last time.
Okay, okay. I think we should keep it, Jean, unless anyone has an issue, they can email if they want to.
we should leave it at 850 in 1 bedroom because that's what we had and we want to make minor changes as we go along. Is that the idea?
Is that okay with everyone?
Except I know Oscar wants to change.
Except Oscar. Oscar wants something else.
Okay,
It doesn't hold the force of law anyway. I mean, so if we want to change it at a later date, fine. Let the
Yeah, it's just
planning
a
board do it.
suggestion. All of these are recommendations and
Right. So let's,
suggestions.
yeah, leave
We
it
only
as it has.
Yeah.
Come back. Yep.
so I already talked about, should we consider site plan review by planning department staff instead of design review board, and where, you know, we're just gonna be a little bit vague on that. And Reg Foster also says that ADUs and accessory buildings should be allowed by right. Why are we requiring a special permit? Well, we're requiring a special permit because this is new. You know,
And I think, again, this is something that we can vet with the planning board as we, you know, or with whatever group is discussing the ADUs, but I think it's a good point of what it is. But
so we'll leave it a special permit, just to be
for right
kind
now,
of cautious approach as we go forward.
right.
And then he had all kinds of suggestions about energy efficiency and so forth. I really think this is the work of the Climate Action Plan Committee rather than anything we need to add to our housing plan.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I suppose we could say in our plan, that I don't think we say now, is that the MBTA communities guidelines say you can't have special energy efficiency requirements for this compliant multifamily housing that you don't also have for commercial.
For townwide, yeah.
That's the guideline. It is there. That's whether we mention it or not. But you know, that's a rule just we have to recognize. Should the include some mention of this? Oh, on page 7, he talks about an example of how another town uses its affordable housing trust, actually buys small
Yeah.
single family homes, renovates them, and then resells them at affordable prices. But then in his own paragraph, he says how he doesn't think this really could happen in Needham because the price of our housing to begin with is too high. So I think I'm just not going to pay attention to that.
I
I
just think
think
we don't
it-
have any money. We have to find ways to fund our affordable
No.
housing trust.
I don't think there's any purpose in mentioning as an example. We could add this to the examples of things of ways to control tear downs. We could add an example like this, but I think it's kind of far fetched, actually. I'll leave it alone.
Yeah.
It's a suggestion that is it really the select board and the community preservation committee to take the lead on strategically investing and leveraging local resources. Well, if it isn't the select board that puts appropriation articles on our town meeting and the community preservation committee that makes recommendations on how to spend CPA money, I don't know who else it would be. So I don't know how to respond. That was Reg's suggestion, but I don't know how to respond to that. I think the way we have it with select board and CPA is fine.
I agree.
CPC. That's it. That's the end. Okay, now,
Jean, thank you for this heroic effort. I know there's a lot of information and we're so lucky to have you because you're super detail oriented and didn't mean to move you along, but I want to make sure that if anyone has anything, please send any information to us. And thank you so much for being so thoughtful about all of this. It's really appreciated.
there's just one more thing.
Oh, no.
This membership right here. This is your last chance. If there's something in that plan that we need to change, this is your last, well, not your really, but substantively, we're telling Karen that to make changes. And we don't want to, however we meet again to bless the final thing in 3 weeks, be telling her to make substantive changes. This is the time to speak. Are we good with this wonderful plan?
I think we're good. And again, if anyone has any, I think it's amazing. And if anyone has any thoughts afterwards, please email them. And Lee, do you want to talk about next steps?
Well, next steps is, I think for me, is figuring out when we're going to actually meet again to be able to close this out. So we'd like to get it done by the end of the year. I mean, I know it's the holiday season. I don't see it as really being a long meeting. I mean, Karen's going to make the changes to the plan. So if we could pick a date and a time sometime within the next 3 weeks, while we're all collectively here, that works for everybody, I'd like to get that closed out tonight. So I know we normally meet in the evenings. I don't know if people want to stick to that schedule or pick an early morning for this last meeting.
For
or
a hand for
Yeah.
evening?
Or is it, or how early is early?
let's say 8:30.
Yeah, I'm not available in the mornings.
Okay, then that's off the table.
Well, I mean, you guys can meet, but just so you know.
Thursday, the
Noontime?
29th. Are we looking at Thursday, the 29th?
Yes,
Of December.
Yeah,
of December.
December? I'm
Yeah.
out of town, I think.
I'll be away as well.
Hmm.
so can it be first of the year or no?
I really wanted to get it done this year because we're
Well,
actually, you know, we're looking at, you know, submitting our action plan for the MBTA communities
Right,
by
right.
the end of January. So having this done and complete and this committee having signed off on that work will make that next step easier.
So
The
I have a
22nd
question
too
for
soon?
Karen. Karen, when will you have it completed?
Well, you know, there, besides the substantive comments that we went through tonight, I also have a lot of changes, recommended changes in language and format and presentation. So, you know, I mean, I could probably push it for a week, but 2 weeks would be I would be a more comfortable.
So what about the 22nd?
Yeah.
So that's the 22nd.
I think it's just so hard to get everyone together during the holidays.
And everything.
It is.
Is there like a 4 or 5 PM time if Heidi's always?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Sure.
So long as it's,
Is a 4 or 5 PM time possible for people?
5 PM works for me, but some days, so it depends on the day.
So we shoot for the 22nd?
The 22nd at 5 or 4.
That
Okay,
could work.
okay, let's do that. And I'm sorry, I forgot one thing. And this was a memo from Oscar, but is reminding me of things that we meant to talk about. And that is, if we're gonna have to connect our apartment A1, we have to include the library. I don't think anybody has an issue with that. It's just putting it in for the purpose of connectivity. But then what about the Episcopal Church across the street? We don't need it for connectivity because we can connect via the library. Do we want to include that church, and do we want to include the other churches in our recommendation for apartment A1 rezoning? You know, for annual town meeting 2024, or do we want to put it for further study?
So
I
we
think-
have 3 that are actually already buried in there, right? So
yeah,
we have the
I didn't even realize. we'd
So we
missed
have the
any.
2
should
next to
include them.
Hillcrest, and then we have the one in the Heights. So, right, so these are, and we have St. Joe's, basically, that's already there,
Right.
right?
It's
They
already
should
So
be
they're-
included.
So they're basically those that are right in our contiguous areas, we just have them in there and they're just, you know, but then we also mention separately 4 churches that are at major intersections in town. Not every church, but just some major ones. And those are again in the future study stuff, right? So those
So
are,
we can just put those in future study.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Thanks, Jean.
and the same
what-
within neighborhood business, right?
Okay, the neighborhood business, any changes there, like especially at Hersey? That's future study, right? Is that what you're talking about by neighborhood business?
Yes, that Hersey and then over by
On Central Ave by Pinellas?
yes.
Okay, okay. And then we already talked about the SRA, SRB change.
I think, yeah, 4, 5, and 6 go into the future thing.
That's future. Okay, so I think I took care of that. But the Episcopal, I really want to know, what do we think about the Episcopal? Zone it apartment A1 or leave it alone?
We have to treat all the churches the same.
Treat other
It's
churches the same.
contiguous like that, Gene, it sort of makes sense. It's right there
Okay,
across the
Yeah,
street.
I mean, we can't,
And its parking lot is
We-
actually
yeah,
next
we
to
can't-
the parking lot is next to the library.
That's true, the parking lot's across the street.
Yeah.
All right, we dealt with the issues. We're, sorry for that last minute thing, but we're all set with that. Then, unless a member has another issue that they want to make sure we deal with. It's time for a motion to adjourn.
I just
Leah.
have one question because it wasn't clear to me. We talked about 4 and 5. I just want to know what time did we choose?
I prefer 5. if we can
I
do that.
prefer 5.
5.
Thank you very much.
And Jean, you were looking for a motion to adjourn? So moved.
Second,
Do you want me to go through the room? So
Check my calendar.
Karen-
Could you call for
Karen,
the vote?
I'm just gonna go
Um,
through the, so Oscar Mertz,
Yes.
Beautiful.
Marcus Nelson.
Yes.
Helen Gregory,
Yes.
Ed Cosgrove,
Yes.
Ed Scheidler, sorry. Rhonda Spector,
Yeah.
Heidi Frail,
yes.
Michael O'Brien,
Yes.
Emily Cooper,
Yes.
Jean McKnight,
Yes.
and yes for myself. And thank you all. This has been really great. And thank you, Jean, really. You
We
did a
got
great
through
job.
it.
We got through it, Jean.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay,
Thank
good
you.
night.
Have a
Leah
good
and
night.
Alex and Karen.
Good night.
Bye, and
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.